listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God! Give away!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me will be Sean.
Hello.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing Event Horizon, the Paul W.S. Anderson movie, not Paul Thomas Anderson. That'd be quite a different movie, I'm assuming, if he directed it. But so this was a movie that was Paul Anderson's follow-up, Paul W.S. Anderson's follow-up to Mortal Kombat.
Yes.
So it was had Sam Neill in it, who was still relatively fresh off Jurassic Park, because that was just a couple years prior, a few years prior.
What was the Carpenter film? Is it in the
Mouth of Madness?
Was that was post Jurassic Park, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So probably in between. These two.
Same era.
Yeah.
It also had Lawrence Fishburne, who had done some different movies at that point, and was getting to be a big name. He hadn't been in The Matrix yet, but was still a pretty well-known and respected actor at that point. But before we get into discussing Event Horizon, we'll go through some recent things we've been watching. So have you seen things to recommend or discuss?
Yeah. So we were on vacation and been busy, so I haven't watched a lot. My wife was off, so anything I watched was with her. So
Yeah.
that was some stuff we would mutually enjoy, and kind of some light stuff. We watched Game Night, which
Okay,
is the
that
comedy.
comedy.
Yeah, with Jason Bateman and
Rachel
McAdams.
McAdams. Not
Kyle
Weiss.
Chandler's in it. Michael C. Hall, Chelsea Peretti. She's in it very briefly. But yeah, I'd heard like pretty good things about that film, and you know, I like good studio comedies when they're good. I'm like actually pretty thirsty for those because most comedies that come out are typically not that great. You know,
Yeah.
you'll get a few really good ones a year, I think. And this one is like pretty good. Like I would say like a B plus, A minus. Definitely recommended. It's a bit of a murder mystery, sort of. It is very much kind of a genre film in that regards. And that's kind of lineage, I guess, of mystery comedies on some level. But it's also, you know, kind of like action-y a little bit. Maybe a little bit more action than you would expect. But it's all played for laughs, and it's all well done. But yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit. Like it was like what we were looking for, essentially.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a. I'm trying to think of what, I don't want to compare it to Clue. That's kind of what you think of, but it's not like somebody gets murdered and they're all trying to figure out who it is. Like it is about Jason Bateman. He is a very competitive person.
Yeah.
And it's the opening montage. He meets Rachel McAdams. She's also competitive, and they kind of like have that bond over that.
Yeah.
And then, and essentially he has a competitive, I guess, streak with his brother, who is more successful, better looking, and all this stuff, and is about them having a game night together. But his brother's rich, and all of his friends, they have their normal game nights, and one of his friends talking like, "Oh yeah, you know, I heard rich people, they have rich people fight clubs, you know, and they pay people to fight and all this stuff." And then so they go to his brother's house for a game night, and things go from there.
Yeah.
And it's really good. Jason Bateman is great in it as always. Rachel McAdams is great in it. Everybody's really funny in it. So I definitely recommend. I think we got it from Redbox for like $2.
Yeah.
Definitely recommend checking that out if you're looking for a new comedy. And I want to see Blockers really bad too. And I think that just came out to rent today, because that stuff always comes on digital to buy first.
Yeah, when it's like $7 to...
Yeah, or even still, I think that's still like $7 to rent, and now it's like, before it was just like $15 to buy.
Yeah, because it'll be to purchase only.
Yeah.
And then they go to the expensive rental option.
Yeah.
And then eventually it gets down to the normal like $5 or less rental option.
Recently, if it's stuff we really want to see, or we're just, again, if it's like some comedy where there aren't a lot of them, we'll just normally hit Redbox for those. And then I also watched, I did watch a little bit of Arrested Development. I think I watched the first episode. We may have watched the second one. I don't remember. It was fine.
Yeah.
We just haven't got back to it. That was before we left for vacation, and just, it's been a little bit of time. So we just haven't got back to that. And then I also watched Molly's Game, which is the Aaron Sorkin
Jessica Chastain.
Yeah,
movie.
written and directed. And oh my gosh, I'm already blanking on who is in that film.
Michael Cera's in it.
Yes, Michael Cera. It's based on a true story. Idris Elba is the other another main character.
It's about a bunch. It was about wasn't like a former Olympic hopeful that got injured, and then started organizing poker games for celebrities that involved some pretty big names and pretty high dollar amounts.
Mm-hmm.
That became like a big scandal, like where she was the one who was in trouble for it, but because I guess she got caught. But then the people who were at the games weren't getting in trouble for doing it.
Yeah, essentially. And what's good about it too is that
It's based on a true story.
I think Aaron Sorkin said in one of the vignettes, because there's only like one special features. Again, I went to Redbox for this. It was $2 to rent, $5 to buy.
Yeah.
So I just bought it,
Yeah.
so I'll let you borrow it if you're interested. I took that Aaron Sorkin masterclass, which I've talked to you about that before, but essentially it is a website that has all these different professionals of different disciplines that have courses. I did the Aaron Sorkin one. There's a David Mamet one on dramatic writing as well. There's like a Ron Howard directing one I'm going to look at soon. But I had done the Aaron Sorkin class, and I've like loved The Social Network. I've watched some of his TV stuff. And so I just had been wanting to watch this too, especially just taking this class. So it was interesting to see, maybe some ways where he maybe deviated from some of his lessons, like where he's like, hey, you should do this. And maybe he could have came back, and if he did correct those, but it's a balancing act. Like there's some things that happen in this film that just seem almost happenstance, or they seem a little too convenient. There's only a couple moments like that, but also too, I think he very much is about dramatic writing. Like he doesn't try to write as people speak in real life. He doesn't, he's worried about the drama, and he kind of is aware of like, hey, this is a story we're telling, we're trying to build drama. He is very much a student of like Shakespeare and classical works. So it's his first time directing around, and I think it was competently directed. He did a pretty decent job, but obviously, if you're looking at something like Social Network, he's not going to stack up to Fincher. It's competently done, but the script is so good and the actors are really good that it's fine. You know what I mean? Like it would have been hard for him to ruin this movie. Just because he is an intelligent guy. And a good writer. But yeah, it's pretty. I think it's well over 2 hours. It's pretty long, but also it doesn't feel like it stays in one place for too long. It's telling kind of a bigger story. But yeah, it's very, very fascinating. And it even had me looking up stuff afterwards, like, okay, who was Michael Cera's character based on, And Sorkin says it wasn't based on one character. He was again, just like The Social Network, he was like a combination of several characters to achieve some, I guess, things that had to happen dramatically in the film to tell the story, instead of like making 15 different characters. But I think essentially it was centered around one actor, which some people seem to believe it was maybe Tobey Maguire. Because he's like, I guess, part of something of, well, I'm not going to mention the name of it, but a group of poker players with like Leo DiCaprio and somebody else. But yeah, it was a really interesting story. And back to my point about in the vignette, him saying something along the lines of like, you don't expect a story about poker, somebody saying poker games to be inspirational. It is very much about this woman who, even though she was doing these poker games, she very much tried to keep it straight and not do anything illegal during the process. Things kind of spin out of control and deviate at times, but for a very long time, like she's like, hey, I want to do everything by the books, legit. I'm not trying to go outside the boundaries. She's somebody who's very driven, and that's the point of them even bringing up the fact that she was an Olympic hopeful, is because it had been pushed into her as far as her father pushing her academically and athletically. So she is somebody very driven, and like I think she did all this when she was like late 20s, 26 or something. You know what I mean? And she was like putting together these big games for very powerful people. So I definitely recommend it, renting it on the cheap, or if you are a fan of Sorkin or any of the people involved, I think like $5 at Redbox right now. It's not too bad to buy. Because of the full Blu-ray doesn't have any special features. Because sometimes the Redbox rips those from them.
Yeah.
This version, I was like, I looked it up. There was one 3-minute vignette that's on there. So I went ahead and bought it, and it is that exact Blu-ray I think you could buy at the store.
Yeah.
You just don't get the case. But yeah, that was pretty much it as far as new stuff. On vacation, so I watched a lot of stuff that I'd seen before, or bits and pieces here and there.
See, so I watched a few things. So I watched this movie Tau. It's Tau that's on Netflix. That came out recently, and it has Micah Monroe in it, who is in It Follows and The Guest. Ed Skrein, who was in Deadpool, the first one, and some other things. Gary Oldman's a voice in it. And it was about, let's see, the IMDb synopsis is, a woman is held captive in a futuristic smart house and hopes to escape by breaking into the computer programs that control the house. And I think that, like, at a very basic level, that's what the story is, but not really. It's basically just like her character is, you know, somebody that's kind of makes her living stealing stuff from people. It's all in the first 2 minutes of the movie. And then she gets kidnapped for this program, or to be a test subject for this program. And it's because she's somebody that, you know, lives outside the law, that the police probably wouldn't care if they go missing. So that the idea is the guy's just been kind of capturing people like that to test his program on, because he works for like a big tech company. It's trying to sell AI. So he figures if he can test it, you know, memory implants or recordings or whatever with people that no one will miss, then that can speed up the testing process versus having to do it ethically and legally and all this stuff. And then Gary Oldman is the computer Tau, who is kind of like a HAL ripoff, just basically like the AI that runs the house, who's less advanced than what the ideal is the guy's trying to get put together. And Micah Monroe's character kind of befriends the AI and helps teach it things about music and the world and helps it learn.
It's like Beauty and the Beast, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like, I remember there was, what was it? An episode of The Office when Jim and Pam pretended to be like, because they made Dunder Mifflin Infinity, which was like the online sales portal for their company. Mm-hmm. And then they pranked Dwight by pretending via text message that the Dunder Mifflin Infinity went sentient and became self-aware. And it was like, I'm going to beat you at sales. And then at one point, Dwight's like, how do I know this isn't Jim? And it responded like, what is a gem? In this movie, like she would say like, well, I'm a person. He's like, what is a person? And it's just a lot of things like that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you don't like music? What is music? So it's just a lot of stuff like that. And
did you see? You didn't see the season of Silicon Valley yet, did you?
No, I've not watched it yet.
There is an AI that looks just like the one from Ex Machina.
Yeah,
it's a head that. What is Richard's assistant's name?
Oh, Jared.
Jarrett, who Jarrett, you know, forms a friendly relationship with because it's somebody he like forms a bond with.
But it's one of those movies where it seems to me it's high tech, but the guy, this computer programmer that runs like this company, does everything with like these big touch screen AIs that you talk to. You know how like Iron Man, like Tony Stark controls like Jarvis? It's like that. So it's this kind of like unobtainable, not really realistic technology. And it's pretty much just her trying to get the AI to learn enough to want to help her. And then it's got some pretty dodgy CG for the robots and drones and things in the house. So obviously the
dodgy CGI is no good in 2018.
And the thing is,
you know,
like comparing this like Event Horizon, which we're going to get to, like it definitely looks better than that.
Yeah.
But it's just a lot of times you can tell that it's CG. Mm-hmm. You can tell that it's not a physical prop in a location, which just makes it stick out a lot more, because there's like drones that fly around that are smaller, and like the suspension of disbelief that you have to do to believe it's real, it requires the same amount of suspension of disbelief really as the spear from Phantasm.
Yeah.
And that's a movie from 1979.
I know, man. You know, rethink the plans. I just, especially if it's something like it's supposed to be a serious horror film or a thriller, you know, that just totally breaks the immersion.
Well, I think this was supposed to be more like a techno thriller.
Yeah,
but,
that like breaks the immersion, and it's just kind of deflates.
But when you look at things about AI, like Ex Machina, I think is a much better delve into AI technology and the implications of it and things like that, and still giving you a believable implementation. Granted, it probably had a bigger budget than this movie because it's a Netflix original. It's mostly set like in this one location, like all these movies kind of tend to be. But it's just, competently directed. And it looks like the director had done a lot of effects work on bigger movies. So I'm assuming that's how he got the gig. And, competently enough directed. The acting in it's pretty good. Like, if you didn't have Michael Monroe in it, it's might as a little bit less charismatic. The movie would probably be hard to watch. But at least, with her, she's at least enjoyable to see. It's just, like, when I first heard the concept of she's stuck in, like, a smart home trying to get out, I was like, oh, it's just kind of like a modern update, like on kind of like a schlocky kind of 80s, not to be like this directly, but like When a Stranger Calls or some kind of genre-esque movie like that where it's a smart home or something. Like, is it just kind of a fun exercise like that? And it's trying to go more in the direction of like more heady concepts, but not quite getting there because there's really not enough to chew on. And it does really sound like Gary Oldman just kind of phoned it in because it's like very... what are you talking about? I don't know what that is.
Wouldn't it have been great if, like, the end of the film, it pans behind a wall and Gary Oldman's just sitting there talking into a microphone?
Like, I would not be
leaned back in his chair.
I would not be surprised, like, if the offer sheet went out to him. It's like, oh, you can shoot this in 2 days and make this paycheck. And he's like, oh, sure.
Yeah.
And then they just kind of took the first take of everything. Like, I don't know. It just
they booked him for 2 hours and was like, the movie's 2 hours long. Get talking.
Yeah. So when I saw the concept, I was, it was a Netflix original, and as we mentioned before, the reputation of a lot of those Netflix originals varies. So my hopes weren't super high, but it had Michael Monroe in it, and I really liked It Follows and The Guest. I don't know if I've seen anything else she was in. I did not see the Independence Day reboot. That came out a couple years ago that she was in. But like I thought like, oh, this has Gary Oldman and her and Ed Skrein. Like that's a pretty decent cast for this type of movie. And then it was just kind of a movie that to me is kind of a middling, because I think like on IMDb, the user score was 5.7 or something. It's 5.7 out of 10. So I guess that's, not too far off base. It's, it's on there. It's not super long. If you like the cast and everything, you can watch it. It's not laughably bad or anything. Just it didn't really go far enough in any direction with any of the concepts to get me entertained. And the AI stuff, it did far less with it than other movies in recent years. So it just kind of left me like, oh, it's a shame that they had this script for this cast. If they had something a little bit more thought provoking, or they could have gotten more out of the talent if they had a better script, I think. But so that's on Netflix. You can watch that. Saw The Incredibles 2 in theaters because it came down to seeing either Jurassic World 2 or Incredibles 2, and the timing of the movie showings only worked out where I could see Incredibles 2. And because we're trying to use our movie passes as much as possible before that company goes belly up, because I think that might happen. but saw Incredibles 2 and I really enjoyed it. I don't know that it's better than the first one or as good. It's, it's still good. It's way better than the Cars or the kind of bad Pixar they've had in recent years. It's definitely good Pixar, and it's making a shit ton of money. It's just, I don't know if it reaches the heights of like their best movies. But it's definitely enjoyable. And it's one of those things where I kind of forgot the original Incredibles had some more adult content, like characters getting killed in kind of brutal ways. Because like the characters that had capes and like it showed how they all got killed and stuff.
Oh yeah.
So it had stuff kind of like that. But the new one still had some adult concepts, and then like voice work. I had Bob Odenkirk was a new character that did a lot of voice work, who was really good. And I enjoyed it, and it touched on some concepts. I think like because after I saw that with Julia, we were talking, it seemed like it touched on a number of social concepts, but didn't take any of them that far. So it stopped short of making any big statement about anything and made a number of small statements about a number of things. Because in the movie, basically, Elastigirl, like superheroes are still illegal after the first movie.
They're illegal?
Illegal.
Okay.
So the entire premise of the original Incredibles was they were superheroes and it became illegal. So all of them had to get normal jobs, and then they had to kind of come back together at the end on an island to stop the bad guy. And they're still illegal, and the family gets involved in stuff, and then Bob Odenkirk is like a wealthy business owner whose dad was in well with superheroes and was friends with them, and he wants to make it legal again. So he's trying to put together like a PR push to get laws changed for them to be legal again. So he wants Elastigirl to go out and do some positive things to get some good PR for heroes to try and make it legal again. And then that's kind of like the basic concept. So there's a number of things it touches on, like the mom being the one out in the workforce and the dad being the stay-at-home parent. And then there's different elements like that. And there's a few social things about, women and men. So there's a few things here and there, but it doesn't really dive that far into any of them. It just is kind of, layer level or, skin. It only goes skin deep with some of these. It doesn't really go to super in-depth levels of social commentary because it's a kid's movie at the end of the day. It's a Disney Pixar animated film. Yeah. So it doesn't go super deep with any of those issues, but it does touch on enough things to give people something to think about.
Is Jason Lee in it, or did he die?
He's not in it.
Okay.
Because I'm trying to remember, like I did not rewatch the first one. I just had
Is there a post-credit scene where Sam Jackson shows up, but now he is Nick Fury?
No. I mean, he is in it. But the movie, there's a couple of lines of dialogue where a character like basically says shit, but they say shh, and then like kind of cut to the next scene. So there's a few things in it. It's like, this isn't exactly super kid friendly.
Aiming at teens, like Pixar teens.
I think it's still PG. It just doesn't really.
But I'm like, I don't know. You wonder like why. You know what I mean? Like, is it that funny to adults? Like almost saying shit. I don't know that adults are just like, oh man. Yeah, they almost said it in a cartoon.
I think it's more just they wrote the dialogue as they would for a normal film and just have to kind of cut around it.
Yeah.
Because Brad Bird, like after The Incredibles, he had done the Iron Giant before. He did The Incredibles, and then he also directed Mission Impossible 4: Ghost Protocol, which was a really good movie.
Yeah.
He did Tomorrowland with George Clooney, which was not a big hit, and then came back to Pixar and did Incredibles 2. So it seems like it's more of just a movie that could have been a live action movie, and I think it's coming at the perfect time because when the first Incredibles came out, superhero movies were far and few between. Now there's 6 a year, so I think audiences are a lot more primed for that type of content, and it's it's good and it's standalone and it's more family friendly.
Does it have any like updated commentary on superheroes and the way they're viewed?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, it does
because things have changed on how they are viewed now.
Well, and part of the big concept of the movie is just they're illegal, so it kind of goes under that concept in a much less convoluted way than like Captain America Civil War did or something.
Yeah.
It's more straightforward. Just it's illegal to be a superhero, and it lays out very clearly, like, because they typically cause a ton of collateral damage and could have made things a lot worse.
Yeah.
So it was an enjoyable enough movie. I really liked it. I don't know if I like it more than the first one, but it's definitely enjoyable. I'm gonna try to see Jurassic World at some point. Just I know the things I heard about it weren't great, and
I've heard some positive buzz about it. I heard it's like kind of, I don't want to say schlocky, but just like a fun, straight genre film at times. Not to be taken too seriously.
Yeah.
I heard somebody saying, "Hey, I love seeing horror directors direct action." So I'm interested in seeing that too. I haven't seen anything in theaters. It's just been busy. We're recording this on July 3rd, also, so The Purge isn't out yet.
Yeah.
It seems like it's got a 50% right now on Rotten Tomatoes, which there's not many reviews in.
Yeah, so less positive than the prior one.
Yeah, from what I've been reading, it doesn't seem like it's a maybe must-see.
Because it sounds like it's more social commentary, but only kind of surface level.
And two, they've kind of already touched on the beginning of The Purge before. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying they're not going to flesh it out. Obviously, they will, but it's less exciting seeing the beginning of it. Considering you felt like they've already touched on that before, maybe not in this capacity, but it does feel like they're kind of where they're heading with this right now is they're kind of tapering off and getting funneled into what they're limited to do,
Yeah.
you know, unless they go forward again. But when you start going backwards, it's like, okay, we've kind of heard that story. There's only so much more you can do on the back end
Yeah.
of where this story started.
Yeah, and if I get a chance to see that, I'll try to do like a video review or something if I can see it, because I'm going on vacation myself at some point. So I'm just trying to figure out when there'll be time to see these different things. But yeah, so I also watched parts of season 2 of 13 Reasons Why. Because I watched the first season. It's one of those things where you just watch it, and then initially you're like, oh God, I hate this. But then once you get an episode in, you're like, oh, okay. And then you get interested in where the story goes because they lay out little tidbits. And I have heard there's a lot of people saying that's a very bad thing for kids to watch because it really encourages negative behaviors or shows a lot of things. I would say that it's adult content. Like it shows drug use and sexual assault and a character committing suicide and actually achieving what most people who commit suicide would want it to achieve.
Yeah.
Because, you know, people think, oh, it'll make everyone think about what they did, and it'll cause, you know, people to think about things, and it'll cause it to be meaningful and impactful. And in this thing, there's an entire trial about the school board being sued over the suicide of the girl. And so all this stuff comes in that can encourage other people to want to do that themselves. And then it shows a lot of content that could be triggering to people that have experienced like sexual assault, because it has one like where it's just kind of straight up, and then one where a character was drunk at a party and things like that. So there's these different situations that could be, you know, very touchy subjects for people that have lived through things like that. So to show that you probably shouldn't let your 15-year-old watch if you have kids that age, if they're 18 or older, whatever. But you know, if they're really young and impressionable, probably not the best thing to let them watch. You know, if you have a kid that really wants to watch it, you should probably watch it yourself first and decide if you're comfortable with them watching it or not. Because I know, like, I as a kid probably watched, or I did not think, I did watch a lot of age-inappropriate things. But watching Predator, where an alien blows people up and someone makes a joke about, you know, like sexual jokes, that's not the same as watching a show where people, like, somebody gets raped. Like, that is different. But yeah, so I watched part of that. I haven't finished the second season yet, but it's one of those things I just throw in the background, like when I have other things, I have nothing going on. So I did watch that. But yeah, so that was kind of all the stuff that I watched. So we can get into our review of Event Horizon, which is on Amazon Prime right now if you want to watch it. I know it's been off and on Netflix over the years, but right now it's on Amazon Prime. And this is, of course, the Paul W.S. Anderson movie that came out in 1997. And reading up on it, apparently the production of it got rushed because of the timeline of when Titanic was going to come out. Because they wanted to come out before Titanic, so then they had to cut the post-production portion of the film dramatically from what the normal schedule is. And then there was footage cut from the movie, because I think they said the first cut was like 2 hours long or over 2 hours. I thought that was too long and had too much bloat. So they cut stuff out for the theatrical cut to get down to the runtime that they ended up with.
And I guess Paramount didn't have any more tent poles in August or something, and they were like, they really wanted to hit that date for that as well. Yeah. So it's a shame that he kind of got pushed up against the wall. And I think it said from Project Greenlight to completion, it was like 10 months.
Yeah.
Which seems like a huge undertaking. Like, all things considered, I think he made a good film. Considering those constraints of the nature and the scope of this project.
Because I think they said they'd set aside like 10 weeks for editing, and then they had to cut into that and like cut it down so even less time.
And then it got bad, really bad
audience. Yeah, because I think they said their initial like 2 hour cut got bad audience feedback.
Yeah.
So then they trimmed it, and it ended up being a 96-minute movie. So, you know, they trimmed out, 20, 30 minutes. And then the thing that apparently sucks was a lot of the footage they trimmed out. The idea was maybe they can go back and do a director's cut at some point, but a lot of that material is just gone. Once it was cut out of the film, they lost the actual negatives and the original footage.
Because, too, they said DVDs weren't a thing at the time.
Yeah,
they weren't prepping for, extra footage to be shown or anything like that. It was the film's the film, it's going to get released, and that's it.
A lot of it's just gone. And then there was people that said there was they maybe found some VHS copies that had the footage. But if so, it would have just been VHS video quality but then even that turned out to not have the footage. So they, basically said there's like a few minutes of deleted scenes, but not a lot of the establishing stuff that they had in the movie initially that would have fleshed out some of the relationships more and some of the scenarios more.
It does feel disjointed. I'll have to say, I've actually never watched this film.
Yeah.
So watching it from start to finish, it does feel very disjointed at times, and sometimes it does feel like it's jumping from one kind of ghost house scene to another.
Yeah.
And it is very much doing like a beeline to like set up motives, and then maybe some payoffs with some things.
Yeah.
And yeah, it feels like it did need more time, but
well, I guess too we should give what the synopsis is. We'll do full spoilers throughout because this is a movie that's kind of hard to discuss without getting into where it goes. And it's harder to necessarily spoil the movie. If you want to watch it, it's on Amazon Prime now, so you can go see it. But the basic synopsis is a rescue crew investigates a spaceship that disappeared into a black hole and is now returned with someone or something new on board. And then, like I said before, so the movie Sunshine, the Danny Boyle film, has a pretty similar storyline, and so does the Cloverfield paradox. Of ship, and some type of scientific mission goes missing. Years later, a crew goes. They find the original ship, and then things go wrong. And that's been the basic plotline for a number of these types of movies. But Event Horizon is the one that goes the most into horror, because Danny Boyle's Sunshine is more, it's horror-ish, but it's sci-fi more than that. And like the Cloverfield paradox is kind of just sci-fi. It doesn't really get scary or try to go for scary, really. It has some kind of out there moments, but Event Horizon full on goes for horror. It goes for some Hellraiser-esque moments. And
yeah, that was, I guess the screenwriter pitched it as The Shining in space, but it definitely feels super Hellraiser. And I guess the original description in the script for the, what is the thing that made the black hole? What is that thing called?
Oh, just the gravity drive.
Yeah, the sphere or whatever. Apparently, it was described as this kind of free-floating thing and very featureless, I believe. But Paul W.S. Anderson wanted to make more of a feel of the Hellraiser cube and stuff, which it definitely does. And Sam Neill, by the end of this, looks like, one of the Cenobites.
Well, the gravity drive room looks like something out of a Tool music video from the 90s.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there's a lot of influence from Alien and Hellraiser.
Well, then there's that one scene where the light fixtures like fill up with blood and it gushes everywhere. That's shining.
Because a lot of flashing lights, like there will be lightning in a ghost house film. They really kind of go for it. And there's some I think impressively done, just big moments of practical effects. The CGI is terrible by today's standards.
Well, yeah, I mean, like luckily
watching in HD,
they relegated that mostly to things like water, things like that. The ships mostly look to be like practical models, which hold up far better than CGI from the era would have. Oh, and on the last episode I mentioned that it had Chris Isaacs. Not Chris Isaacs, it's Jason Isaacs. Just one of those, the actors that have the last name of Isaacs.
I was like, was that Chris Isaacs?
No, it was Jason Isaacs, because he's been in a bunch of other stuff. He was in like The Patriot with Mel Gibson, and is like the bad English general or whatever. So, but yeah, so I had, and it also has Lawrence Fishburne in it, who's really good, Sam Neill, and the movie definitely has. I think there's been too something funny is, so the basic idea of like it's this ship. So like I said, full spoilers. The ship is trying to travel at faster than light speed, and it's not by doing like a Star Wars hyperdrive or something. It's by using this gravity drive to essentially fold time and space. So they can go through go through a dimension and come out, the other end of the galaxy, instantaneously. So Stranger Things has had a scene that explained how that happened. What were some other movies that have explained that? Didn't the Cloverfield paradox do that too?
Probably.
There's been like a number of sci-fi movies where they give explanations of how you travel through a portal through one universe to get to another location. And there's a bunch of places or a bunch of stories where they take a piece of paper and they stick something through it. Yeah. So I remember like Stranger Things did a very similar explanation for the upside down. So you have like that element that's been the same across a lot of sci-fi properties. You have them connecting up to this ship and then finding more than they bargained for. And, in the movie, because I had seen bits and pieces of this or heard about it, maybe in high school, somebody used to talk about it a lot. I don't remember who it was. And I'd never seen it. And then I had watched it when I was in college. And I really wasn't sure what to expect from it. Because like, oh, it's Sam Neill from Jurassic Park. And then I watched it like, oh, okay. because this is before I'd seen In the Mouth of Madness. So I was like, oh, okay, this is a different thing than I expected from him. It's him as a scientist on this ship. The people who are on the ship aren't aware of what the mission is until they get there because it's like beyond top secret.
Typical.
Yeah, which is
aliens. They're bum rushed by what the mission is. Yeah.
So they get there and then they find out that this ship didn't disappear. It still exists, and it's just appeared 7 years after it initially disappeared. So they go on the ship, and then it ends up releasing like a burst of gravity energy that disables the ship they came there on. So they have to be on the event horizon. And then they find out essentially that the portal that it opened essentially went through hell when the ship went through and came back out. And the ship itself was kind of alive after going through the portal, or was at least affected by that. And Sam Neill's character, becomes possessed and wants to go back through the portal, go back to that dimension. And then you see the video of the initial crew, what happened to them. Like initially you just hear like sounds and you see like static, but once they actually,
as one does when looking at archival footage from a spaceship disaster,
but when they actually put some filters on it or clean it up, or I forgot exactly the terminology they used was, but when they cleaned it up, then they could see that it's essentially the crew like murdering and raping each other and doing all kinds of gross distortions to bodies. And I think I read that for the scene, they actually had like adult performers for like the assault scenes or the sex scenes. And it really did look kind of like what you'd expect out of a Hellraiser movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Out of
it like this whole thing too is a bit like Doom as well. You know what I mean? And there is a Doom sound effect in this movie, I think. But also, have you ever played the game Dead Space?
I have. It's just been a while.
It's very, very good. By the end of that first one, from what I remember, there is, and I played part of the second one. It is essentially like, I think, you come to find out, hey, they're like, I think it's a bit like Doom, the 2016 one, where they're harvesting kind of part of hell, or you know what I mean, some sort of evil.
Yeah.
And then essentially, everything goes to hell in the ship, and this like whole community is people start turning on each other and killing each other.
I watched one of the Dead Space animated movies. Yeah. So I remember that being similar. But
it's very similar to Event Horizon. Yeah,
they go into like a universe or whatever where it's pure chaos. Mm-hmm. And so basically hell, and then kill everybody and become possessed and have like weird supernatural elements. So the ship, when trying to do this travel, goes through a hell universe. So like you said, Doom, a lot of stuff has had similar ideas to that. And then you have like the crew discovering things throughout the ship slowly, and was it the character Justin goes into the gravity drive, so he's in that universe when they bring him back out, so he tries to kill himself, and you have a lot of things around that. But then the Sam Neill character turn, so I guess like the thing is like, so he wasn't pure evil and didn't intend for that to necessarily happen. It's just once he was kind of in the hallway and saw his wife. And then, like, later on when, he sees his wife and his eyes get gouged out, that's when he full-on becomes kind of, like, possessed or controlled or evil, and not just a doctor who, or, like a scientist who wants to see what happens. So he kind of makes the full heel turn to be full evil demon bad guy, which, again, is very similar to what happens in the Danny Boyle movie Sunshine, which I need to do. Like, I talked about doing a video before.
I need to watch that because I like Danny Boyle stuff, but I just haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's something.
And I haven't seen Darren Aronofsky's The Fountain either.
Yeah. Well, Sunshine had Cillian Murphy in it, Chris Evans, and I'm forgetting her name. She was in Bridesmaids, in Insidious.
Rose Byrne.
So it had her in it. So it had a pretty good cast when it came out. It was just kind of an under-the-radar movie, but for a lot of them were big stars. And that was the one where the sun's dying, so they send a ship with like a nuclear payload to reignite the sun because the Earth is starting to like feel the effects of that and freeze over and all that. And then the first ship goes missing. They send a second one that finds the first one, and then very similar things. So a lot of these movies seem to have these similar elements. But like Event Horizon, like the the horror elements, like the flashbacks and the seeing the one character that has the kid back on Earth, like sees visions of him with his legs rotting with maggots in it and things like that. And then you see like Sam Neill sees like his wife that committed suicide and her eyes are gone. So you have these elements where characters kind of hallucinate things, and it's the ship doing that to them. And Lawrence Fishburne's character hallucinates something that no one else knew had ever happened, that the ship did. So you have like all those elements where it kind of is like building terror and dread, and trying to build up this very creepy atmosphere. And as you said, essentially it's a haunted house in a spaceship.
But it's not, the thing that hurts it is, the pacing isn't well. So the dread never really has time to set in. It's a lot of moments, back-to-back moments. And you're seeing it and you're like, oh, that's some impressive little set piece or flashback thing. But it never really, The Shining, I mean, there are moments in that film, obviously, but the way they're paced and everything, there is time for it to breathe and build that dread and anticipation. This film doesn't leave a whole lot of time for anticipation once things get started.
Yeah, and two, so the movie, you kind of start out with the more sci-fi premise. You don't really see any of the bad stuff.
Yeah, you won't even.
And you kind of get like a few little teasers, like the audio they hear was the last transmission from the ship. So they get these kind of little teasers about what could happen, and you get kind of teased throughout. And I think, what would be most effective is if you build up to this and you build up such a sense of dread by kind of getting this the snippets and tidbits of information, that when you finally see what happens, it's just utterly terrifying. But the way that it's kind of revealed and rolled out and paced, you don't really get that. So when you finally get the big bad, and it's essentially just Sam Neill with like his eyes, he's just Cenobite version of Sam Neill. It's not all that scary or terrifying, because then you've already at that point killed off most of the characters, and there's only a few people left. And so, your main protagonists are essentially Sam Neill and Lawrence Fishburne, really, or who the kind of main characters are. So you get a lot of that build up. Then you get to the end, and it's not really that scary. Like, once again, when you watch a bunch of horror movies, nothing's ever really scary, but it's just, I could see some concepts like that being truly terrifying, because you're teasing the unknown and teasing like things that people can't even comprehend. But then when you do make it pretty easily comprehensible and put it in front of you, then it's a lot, it's just tangible, and
there's no more mystery or fear of the unknown from it. Yeah,
which is like the trailers for Prometheus had me so pumped and enthused for it, because it looked like it was teasing all this unknown stuff. Then the movie itself didn't really do that as much. So I was, kind of let down by that. And then this movie, when I first saw this, because I saw this in the early 2000s, I think, or early mid 2000s. Like, I was into it, and I thought, it was really creepy. But then once I got to the end, it's like, oh, okay, well, this is just kind of like, what you might get from that one Hellraiser movie in space, really.
Yeah.
And I think that just the things that hurt it was that you had this buildup, like you said, the pacing, because you could tell where it felt like it had been chopped up a little bit and was missing things. Because apparently there was more Justin in the room with the gravity drive before he went into it. Because to me, just kind of, I would put my hand in that. I think common sense says, don't touch things you don't understand. Whether it be a snake alien in Prometheus or this portal
thing. I mean, a
thing.
lot of the logic and some of the things that happen in this film are very much just movie-fied, which is totally fine for this, I think.
Yeah,
I'm fine with it. There's even that moment when I think Lawrence Fishburne is walking along in the beginning, and then instead of like somebody's hand on his shoulder, it's a glove that taps it, I think, which they know what they're doing, So it's again,
and he freaks out.
Like Arachnophobia on our last one, there had been many films like this before it, and now they're doing their version of it, and they kind of know what they're doing.
Well, because initially I think the initial script for what Event Horizon would have been a lot more similar to Alien, and that they kind of find like a derelict area and find something there. And Paul W.S. Anderson thought that it was too similar to Alien, so then that's when they kind of turned it into because people had said that Alien was a haunted house in space movie, but that was a very specific creature that was causing it, not the location itself.
Which is what Cloverfield Paradox is very much, there's no one creature, but it's a lot of things, scary things happening.
And then this movie is, the ship itself is haunted, and then you find out why. And then you kind of build that up a little bit. So you can definitely feel the pacing issues in the movie of how things got moved around, or how there's not as much build up to some of the elements. And then, because Sam Neill is kind of your protagonist really for the first half of the movie, but then you kind of get that switch.
Yeah,
where,
And then you lean into Lawrence Fishburne, and then the thing about him leaving somebody behind.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then obviously you're like, okay, now we're following him, because even towards the climax of the film, after Sam Neill like goes out of the window or whatever, he's going in, and then the woman's stuck. The female, I can't remember her name, but one of the female astronauts, or I don't know what you would call them, but
Stark,
probably
the blonde actress.
Yes.
Yeah,
so
Stark.
so of course he doesn't leave her behind. He manages to save
Stark
her.
and Cooper and Justin are saved.
And then he gets haunted by the person that he left behind. Like that's his whole arc. And then, but he ends up, you know, saving those other people.
Yeah,
so he kind of completes the arc, and he does become the main character, or at least the main protagonist.
Yeah.
Through the bulk of the film.
Yeah, because you kind of get to see his arc of being you know, the reason he's so hard ass is because he's still haunted by the past of what happened. And then in this movie, he gets a chance to do the opposite of that and make sure no one's left behind.
And then sacrifices himself.
Yeah, and then the Sam Neill arc was just that his wife committed suicide, and he was obsessed with finding out what happened to the gravity drive that he designed. And it was just that he didn't know when it bent space and time where it went through to get to the final destination. So that's just the thing where he didn't know. And then I guess, you know, you find out, drive you crazy, because, you know, then he sabotages the ship so that they can't escape and kills the pilot and all that type of stuff. And then, you know, like at the end, like Cooper and Stark, like they're in the ship that gets rescued, and then they see that so they get rescued, but then like she hallucinates that they're still there, and then it's still Sam Neill, but then in reality they have been rescued and they're safe.
Yeah.
Because I think they said like different versions of the ending just had to end with that, where they thought they were rescued, but they're really in that hell dimension.
Which made me think either she's just plain hallucinating, or because all those tricks have been played on the characters, that ship was somehow occupied. You know what I mean? Even though it didn't go through hell or whatever, it had somehow, her mind is being played with still. You know what I mean? So they're still not safe.
Yeah. So, and obviously it's a movie that cost like $60 million to make, so it's a pretty pricey movie. Didn't make that much money at the box office. It made less than like $30 million, so it was a box office disappointment. And it became like more of a cult hit over the years on home video and cable and things like that. So it did build up more of a following, but it's never been kind of top of mind. Like, was it movie Life Force we did, the Toby Hooper movie? So I think it'd be in a similar category, not in terms of content-wise, just, you know, director who's made other things. Granted, you know, when you're comparing Texas Chainsaw Massacre to Resident Evil, it's a little bit different, but Toby Hooper, you know, is a known commodity director who made this kind of big space horror movie that cost a bit of money for its time, didn't quite make it back, and has kind of been more obscure. Event Horizon was a movie that cost a lot of money, didn't really make it back, and has been more obscure. So I think that, you know, in terms of where they sit, you know, in their reputation, it could be more similar there.
That might have been a thing too, where I definitely think having the R rating, they used it. I guess the first rating got an NC-17.
Yeah, because there was more like gore and dismemberment.
But, you know, you had to wonder if this happening so many times in the late 90s, early 2000s, is that where that turn started happening?
Yeah.
Where more producers was like, let's veer away from R and go PG-13.
Well, I think that I think what I remember reading too was that the executives, the studio execs, were on set when they were shooting most of the character-based scenes. And then they had already kind of like, then they stopped watching the dailies. So like, oh, okay, we see where this is going. And then they shot a lot of gore for the movie, and a lot of like over the top gore and things like that. And then when they showed them the cut later, they're kind of like, oh, we did not realize that you had filmed all this dismemberment and rape and gore. And then that's part of why it got cut down. Because, you know, like your first cut of everything, your rough cut's kind of bad.
Yeah. And just being rushed also, you know?
Yeah, so when you have a, you know, a rough cut, and then you get the amount of time to get from rough cut to finished cut gets, you know, cut in half essentially, that's going to be tough on anybody, because a lot of your, you know, all-time classics had plenty of time. Now, there's a lot of movies that were, you know, independents that were strapped for cash and made and
not all, even some big budget film, like Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah.
I can't remember her name. I'm losing her name. She passed away just recently, but female editor.
Yeah.
She said they were literally editing up until like hours before the premiere. You know what I mean? Like, it does happen, but that's also because he kept doing reshoots and pushing into the editing time and everything. Like, that does happen on many productions, but it's a shame with This film 10 months total to completion.
Yeah.
You know,
For the level of effects that were in it and the
Yeah.
concept, that seems like a pretty short period of time, even for today's world where these effects heavy movies have a shortened time frame. Because a lot of movies now, like these Marvel movies, from the time that they roll cameras to the time they release it might be a year or might be less than that, but they also have a pretty good process in place
they have a
and
huge
the scripts in
pipeline.
place.
Yeah.
And then, but even then, like Black Panther, some of the effects work wasn't great because they just kind of would hire multiple firms to work on it concurrently to get things done in time. So there wasn't as much of a coherent feel. I mean, it looks all about the same. It's just there's some stuff that obviously was not stellar and doesn't look that much better than movies from a number of years ago. And the like Avengers Infinity War did that too, because there was some scene with characters at the end that looked pretty bad. Characters in some of the armor.
It looks very funny. Yeah.
Looked like, oh, you
A
couldn't
floating
have,
head in an armor suit.
you couldn't have just put them in some cosplay armor or
Yeah.
something like that could have, but you know, so that movie, like Event Horizon, having the compressed time frame does explain a lot of how it has moments that kind of work and some that don't, and it doesn't build as much to a coherent conclusion. It is sad. It sounds like there'll never be a definitive director's cut, because in my opinion, this is probably Paul W.S. Anderson's best movie.
Yeah, I would say so too.
Because I think it's a better movie than Resident Evil, just because Resident Evil disappointed me so much about what it was versus what I expected
Yeah.
it to be, or what the material would allow for it to have been. Mortal Kombat's more goofy fun. I don't really have a huge investment in that. I don't have an investment in this movie either. It's just I saw the potential there for this to be a movie that just scared people shitless, and it kind of fell short of that because it just seems like they were rushed and didn't have time to build things up and didn't have time to really deliver the vision intended to the final product just because of the time crunch. So that is disappointing when things like that happen,
Yeah.
but you have to evaluate what exists.
He said apparently, I guess they were just giving an interview about it. Like one of the producers, like a year after the release, said, "Hey, we didn't give it a fair shake.
Yeah.
We can we can reinstate that." And they couldn't
Yeah.
find the elements. I think he said essentially he doesn't think it's possible, but
Yeah.
they could always show up somewhere.
Yeah.
So that is cool that option is out there, but
Yeah, well, if it hasn't been done at this point, they probably won't find it.
yeah,
'Cause
you never know. There's stuff that gets found sometimes. You know.
but this isn't like trying to think of like a class. This isn't like The Shining or something. This
Yeah.
isn't something people are really devoting a ton of effort
Yes,
to. Like
yeah.
it has like a fan base,
Yeah.
but it's a pretty specific fan base. But yeah, so in terms of like haunted house and space movies, this definitely fits the bill. More so than like the Alien movies, because those were more of creature movie in space. The environment may have been scary because you knew there was a creature in it, but the environment itself, aside from like when they find the eggs and things, like the environment itself is not the hazard so much as the creature. So this movie is more of like the environment is the danger and there is no creature. So there's no like, until the end, there's no one antagonist that kind of goes after the main characters. That only develops when one of your protagonists turns and you realize there's more going on with him than just being a hapless scientist that's trying to fix things. So I guess we can kind of give what our scores are for this movie and kind of wrap up the discussion. So out of 10, what would you give that?
I guess I would probably give it somewhere around a 7, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. In my mind, I think it is a notable but not essential.
Yeah.
Like sci-fi film from the 90s, sci-fi horror
Yeah.
film from the 90s. Like it's definitely one that I understand why some people may have a huge affinity for it. I see
Yeah.
why it would have a certain fan base, but I would not consider it an essential viewing
Yeah.
for everyone. But definitely one of note, I think.
Yeah, and it's surprisingly like a lot of money spent for the type of movie that it was. Because I have to go look, but I'm pretty sure they spent way more on this than they did on like Alien 3 on the final budget. Yeah, so like I would, I'm probably more like it's a 6, like because it's a lot of elements that don't hang like the parts are greater than the sum. Because there are parts of it where you're like, oh man, there's a lot here. Because like the gravity drive, the design of it is really creepy and it looks like something out of a Hellraiser movie. But it just feels like a lot of it doesn't get enough time to really kind of percolate and kind of develop some of the elements that would make it more terrifying. And I guess it's too just like what I want out of like a space horror movie. Nothing's really given me yet. Because like I love Alien and Aliens, but they give me a specific thing.
Yeah.
And like what I was teased by Prometheus and movies like this have just never really been brought to fruition. So
I think play through Dead Space or Dead Space
Yeah, I need to
2
do that.
even. Like 2, I feel like even, if I remember correctly, there may be some elements, or maybe part 1 where you don't realize it, but your character, I think, may be hallucinating. Or maybe I suspected it where you may be firing at people who, you know what I mean, aren't turned. I can't remember exactly, but...
Yeah, I need to go back and play those, because I finally beat the game Alan Wake.
Yeah.
Like, basically, I play like 1 to 2 story-based games a year.
Yeah, it's hard.
Just because the amount of time it takes and the amount of stuff going on.
I heard Dead Space 3, they put in a bunch of microtransactions and all this stuff, but I think I did hear it was still pretty fun, but 2 and 3 had the co-op.
I remember playing the mobile one on mobile devices. That was
too.
most of the story of the original one. So
Yeah, I played that too.
Yeah, so Dead Space, you can check that out if the movie's up your alley. But I guess that'll wrap up our discussion of Event Horizon.
Real quick, I think my favorite quote from this movie, which I never hear people say, and I'm surprised, this isn't the full quote, but Sam Neill says, "Where we're going, we don't need eyes," I believe. And he says something to see or something, but like... That is a pretty good quote.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like in space, no one can hear you scream.
Yeah, it's the Back to the Future, where we're going, we don't need eyes.
Yeah, we don't need roads. Yeah. There's some iconic visuals in it. Surprising that,
It's a messy film.
Yeah, I think if it all hung together, you would see it talked about more.
Yeah.
And two, for a lot of people in this day and age, I mean, once again, I think the CG they use for this stuff is relatively unimportant overall. And it's mostly practicals for the big things, as opposed to these days, use practicals for the small things and CG for the big things.
Yes.
So it makes it, it's like that movie Tau, I think, is obviously more synthetic than this. But yeah, so I guess I'll wrap up our discussion of Event Horizon. If you're listening via iTunes, do us a huge favor and leave a review there. It helps other people find the podcast. If you're listening, watching via YouTube, we always enjoy seeing comments there. So let us know if you have any thoughts on this movie. Check out all the stuff we're doing at housebyvideostore.com. Find links there to all of our social media accounts, to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and all that stuff there, and short films, podcasts. You can find, if you're listening via YouTube and you have like an Android phone, there's the RSS feed for all the podcast posts if you need to get that direct RSS feed to subscribe from the website. Yeah, you can find all that stuff at housebyvideostore.com. On the internet specifically, you can find me on Instagram at @TheWilliamCaps.
And I'm at SplevinSean on Twitter.
And that'll bring this episode of the House by Video Store podcast to a close. Thanks for listening.